Welcome to the AmberMac Show. I am super excited to have Laura Gabor, who is the co-founder of Ecologica and the founder of What in the Tech, on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. A little bit overwhelmed, but I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining so last minute. I wanted to talk about this letter that you and a group had just put out. I also signed the letter, and this is focused on the fact that we're seeing this anti-DEI movement in the US, something that we don't want to import here into Canada, but we're seeing signals that that might be happening. So walk me back to the original idea behind why this letter was started.
Absolutely. I think there's been a lot of conversation that's happened underground or in like whisper networks, group chats, ones that I'm a part of that have said, how do we combat this? How do we protect marginalized folks? Like, what can we do? And I think I kind of went to a breaking point last week when I saw the Shopify news come out about them laying off their team that ran the Indigenous, Black, and Women initiatives. And it was, I think, about 12 people. Now, based on Shopify's earnings, I assume they probably could have continued ensuring that those folks had jobs, but I can't speak to them and their mind frame. However, I did post the article, a snippet of the article on my LinkedIn, and kind of asked, who are we building Canada for? Who's building Canada? And what do we want that Canada to look like? And the comment section was very overwhelmingly supportive, asking the same questions. People obviously having felt the exact same thing or have been thinking those thoughts. And a lot of the sentiment was around what can we do? How can we, put our names to something or support something that is against these policies, the continued kind of erasure of marginalized groups and women. And honestly, Avery, who's one of the writers of the letter, she approached me, and Sarah, who's the other another author, and Jace, we just kind of put our heads together and said, what can we do? So we decided ultimately to write this open letter. And myself, as a founder of a tech company, it was slightly scary to be the publisher because you just don't know what is going to happen, especially when you're fundraising, all that kind of stuff. But I felt like almost a duty as somebody who ran What in the Tech to support the mission that I initially set out to do with that kind of a community initiative. And so we just kind of said, let's do this, spent our weekend working on it, had a lot of support from a lot of amazing folks like you, and went to publish on Monday morning.
It is a really well written letter, and I think it's well focused as well in terms of the audience that you're going after, people who are well aware that this turn that we're seeing in the tech industry is hugely problematic. The thing that concerned me, and one of the reasons I was so excited to support the letter and sign on, is that we know all the data supports the fact that there is a connection between focusing on diversity and inclusion and the success of a company, especially in tech as you're designing products for people. So the thing I always wonder about when we see this movement, this sort of anti-DEI movement, is what is it based on? Do you have any inclination what the reason is for this sudden turn that we're seeing?
That's a great question. And I do think it's a little bit funny that the folks that I think are, let's call it data driven or claim to be very data driven, like to ignore certain data points. There's a lot of folks out there who are also saying that, women aren't being underpaid or aren't this and that. And in the tech industry, I think it's over the last 6 years, the wage gap has grown for women. The data also shows that women run more stable and successful companies in the long run, generally. There's a lot of data to support that, but we have less than 2% of funding going to women. And so I think I don't know if data matters when it comes to these things. And I think it's a bit of a friends club of like, okay, we're going to do what we want to do. We're going to do it however we can make the most amount of money and make our shareholders happy, which now might be a shift again because I think the shareholders are also speaking out. But I think it's this, there's been a performance, I think, put on. And it's very easy to, host a breakfast or make your logo, the pride flag or things like that. But I think because everything has been so easy to roll back and it's been so quick to do it, it makes me question how genuine these changes were. And not only that, but it almost confirms to me that they were never systemic changes. They were always very superficial. And I think until we reach a point where we get systemic changes, we're going to see a lot of this back and forth. And I think systemic changes do feel like oppression to a lot of people.
I think you're right, especially on the point that some of these changes didn't necessarily go far enough. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I think when we talk about the fact that really at the heart of this letter and this movement, if I can call it that, is this goal of inclusion and this goal of fairness, because it's not saying that, okay, you should hire people who don't have the qualifications or the experience to come work in positions. It's saying give them equal opportunity. It's a very important distinction that I feel that some people, especially in the tech community, don't really understand, because their argument, oftentimes, if I do see chattering about this online, is that, oh, well, we've gone too far with DEI. I don't know what that means. I don't know what data supports that. And I certainly spend enough time in tech to know that isn't obvious at any of these companies that I talk to, because I would argue that they probably don't go far enough. Do you think that this letter will actually help to make some of those more significant changes that need to occur?
Well, I think the goal of this letter, there was a couple things that we had set out to do. Number one, I think the main sentiment behind it was that a small group of rich and powerful, generally men, do not speak for the entire tech community. And I think that was kind of the number one sentiment that we really wanted to overwhelmingly show. And we have, as of this recording, over 600 signatures on the letter now. So I think we are succeeding in showing that the majority of the industry does not agree with the rollbacks. I think also we wanted to start a conversation. We take for granted, especially, a select maybe 50, 100 of us, how in the tech bubble we are. And I try and do my best to surround myself with some people who are just completely out of the industry. I still know people who mix up Spotify and Shopify. I know plenty of folks who are on certain platforms and programs and have no idea who the CEO is, despite them being billionaire in Canada. And so I think we take for granted the fact that there's awareness about these problems in the broader kind of nation as a whole. And I think making people aware that this is happening and that we don't agree with it is the main kind of sentiment that we were really trying to start with. And we do hope to continue down a path of more action-oriented steps. We've been talking a little bit behind the scenes about what that might look like, and you'll be the first to know when we have something concrete.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you for taking the initiative on this letter. I think it's such an important first step in many ways. And I think, too, there are lots of people at tech companies who think that, okay, we're going to pursue these new anti-DEI policies because everybody else is doing it. Some of the biggest tech players in the world are doing it, so we should just follow suit. Doesn't mean they're necessarily bad people, doesn't mean that they don't value diversity among their teams. But certainly, I think we should call them out, because if we don't, I think the consequences of this from an economic standpoint in terms of what's happening in this country are really, really significant. So I always say to people, I sleep better at night knowing that we're doing the right thing, especially on this topic. And I hope you feel the same way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the overwhelming majority and feedback has been positive. And I know there's a lot of folks who are doing a lot of hard work in this space too. Toast is trying to put more women into tech. There's queer tech. There's a lot of initiatives out there. And so they're doing a really good job, I think, of continuing to speak up and raise awareness. But I think we would just wanted to put it in one place, kind of like the goal of What in the Tech is to centralize the tech knowledge that we have in the country.
Well, thank you again. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me. And if people want to sign the letter, where's the best place for them to go?
They can go to What in the Tech. They'll see a tab right at the top. It's whatinthetech.co, C-O. They'll see a tab at the top that says open letter, and if they can click that, they'll be able to read it in both French and English, and they'll have to scroll. What a friend said was 14,000 kilometers to the bottom where the form will be, and they can sign there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for your support.